Hello everyone, my name is Alex. I'm a 2000 rated over-the-board chess player, and in this series we're trying to climb to 2300 rapid elo while explaining my thought process as best as I can for your education and entertainment. We open up with e4. My opponent goes for the Sicilian. I think he's from Hong Kong. Yeah, okay. And previously I used to play the a3 Sicilian, looking for the Mengarini gambit type system, which is interesting. And you can find some of those videos on my channel, but I've recently been learning the Alapin Sicilian, actually because I used to see Daniel Naroditsky play it on his speedruns. And okay, this is one of the main lines. The main two moves you're going to see against the Alapin are d5 and knight to f6, and they're both basically just attacking the e4 pawn and applying pressure immediately. So on d5, we're going to take and bait the queen out to d5, but this is not a Scandinavian defense. We do not have knight c3 hitting the queen with tempo or anything like that. So okay, my opponent goes knight to f6, which is interesting, obviously going after the pawn with the knight rather than the queen. And I suppose we have a couple of options here. We could start with bishop to b5 check, kind of like in some Scandinavian lines, but with this pawn back on c7 and this pawn back on c3, which would be interesting. If something like bishop to b5, bishop d7, bishop c4, bishop g4, pawn f3, I think that probably works quite well because we have queen b3 ideas at the end of it. If bishop to b5, knight bd7, which is normally the way to defend to try and get knight b6 in and increase the pressure massively. If bishop e5, knight bd7. If we go c4, there's no e6, which is normally the idea. Because if we go c4 immediately, e6 is very annoying, because after takes and bishop takes, we have this big hole on d4. Black will get a knight there, and we won't be very happy. I've got to say, I think this is a mistake. We're going to go bishop b5 check. We're going to go for it. And I think the reason this is different to some of the gambit lines in the Scandinavian defense, where I'll show you after the game, but white is not supposed to try and hang on to the pawn. I think the difference is, one, there's no pawn c6 ideas, which I assume probably help us. And two, we have the queen coming to b3 as an option, which not only defends d5, but could also apply pressure to b7, which basically makes me think that bishop d7 is out of the question. So knight bd7 looks like the only move. Knight bd7. If bishop c4, then knight b6, and we're not very happy. So knight bd7, the pawn is under attack. If we play pawn c4, there's no pawn e6, so let's say pawn a6, which is typical, trying to chase the bishop. If we take and bishop takes, c4, a6, bishop takes, preparing e6, If we play knight c3, pawn e6, knight c3, pawn e6, we might have time for d4. We might have time for d4 there. Okay, that's interesting. We could, I suppose, consider the immediate queen b3, pawn a6. Queen b3, pawn a6. If bishop back to c4, then knight b6, and we're not doing very well. So we probably have to take, and after, let's say bishop takes, we might be able to grab on b7. So if queen b3, pawn a6, bishop takes, queen takes, the pawn is under attack. We go pawn to c4. If pawn e6, take, queen take, I'm not a fan of. This is interesting. We could, queen f3 doesn't really make sense to me. c4, a6 takes. He could take with the queen rather than the bishop. That's worth noting. Knight c3, pawn e6. I think we just want to strike with a move like d4. Although what we could do is just go knight f3, allow a6, drop the bishop back to like e2, allow the capture and just castle. We could also do that, because I'm not in my opening theory here. So we could give back the pawn, but basically say that black has wasted a lot of time going after it, and his knight should be on c6 instead. Yeah, I think that makes sense. I think that makes sense, because even if holding on to the pawn is the best idea, I don't know how I should be going about that. So the simplest option is probably just to give the pawn back and get castled. I think that's perfectly reasonable. And hopefully this is a good lesson in dealing with opening lines you haven't seen before. Because, you know, I was calculating all this stuff trying to hold on to the pawn, but realistically, do I really need to worry about all that? It doesn't feel necessary. So, okay, pawn a6. If I drop my bishop back to e2, I'm going to get hit with knight to f4, hitting the bishop, and I don't really want to give up my bishop. So bishop c4 looks better. If knight to b6, I mean, already we're looking at sacrifices, right? Which aren't completely ridiculous in some lines. I don't want to take the knight, because the knight kind of sucks. Yeah, take bishop takes. I don't want to give away my bishop pair. Let's go bishop c4. If the knight comes to f4 now, of course, we have pawn d4 with tempo. d4 is the idea. I mean, that's the whole idea of the Alapin Sicilian with pawn c3, is to support a d4 push with a pawn. Whoa. Okay, that's unexpected. That's unexpected. Okay, it feels like we should be able to punish this. First move that comes to your mind should probably be queen to b3 or knight to g5. Those are what come to my mind. Or sacrificing. You know, this isn't ridiculous. Takes. I guess queen b3, the king can just go back. Knight g5, there's always knight to e5 defending. So I don't think there's anything there. But if you go queen b3, my opponent's going to be forced to play pawn e6, which means his bishop is going to struggle to develop. But then again, he probably wants to go b5 anyway and get the bishop fianchettoed. So arguably that doesn't actually make sense for us. So, okay, what about d4 takes, knight takes, e5, rook e1, bishop e7. We have knight f5 actually. So that, yeah, that looks really good. Let's go for d4. And now, if b5 is played, I can bring the bishop back to d3 if I want. I mean, I could come to b3 first, trying to bait the move c4 and then come back to c2, because then we have a very strong pawn on d4, ready to bring a knight to e5 at the correct moment, like bishop f4, rook e1, knight e5, looks very strong. Again, we should consider the sacrifice, takes and takes. There is some logic to it. I mean, we can take on c5 and you can't take back because the queen hangs. If we could change the move order, it would be interesting. Like, if we would take on c5 and knight takes, then this would win the game because of take, take, and take. But if takes, he can just take my bishop. And I don't really have a follow-up. Okay. Bishop takes, king takes, pawn takes. I think that's it. There's no queen d5 ideas because the knight covers. If knight g5, king back, knight e6, that doesn't actually pose a threat. It does hit the queen. Like here, here, here. Comes back. Here, here. Takes. Bishop b7. Knight check. I'm clutching at straws. Let's come back to b3. I can set these ideas up, but if bishop b7, then this doesn't work anymore, because after knight takes, the queen is defended by the rook, so the bishop f7 stuff doesn't quite work. But it is an interesting concept to be aware of. Okay, we have bishop b7. Okay, so if we take a knight takes... I don't think that works. Knight to e5, if knight e5, pawn e5, knight e4 or knight e4 probably. Also, I don't want a queen trade, so that makes no sense. If knight to g5, there's always pawn c4, so okay. We try and shove the pawn forwards, we're going to get hit with c4, and then the pawn is going to hang, so we don't love that either. We could go for bishop e3, trying to encourage black to take, which I think we would welcome after something like bishop takes. If he pushes in bishop c2 and knight g4, we can always come to f4, but I think rook e1 probably makes the most sense, because realistically, we always want this rook on the e-file, supporting any knight to e5 things. That makes a lot of sense to me. Okay, pawn c4. Black has now committed in the center, which I'm happy to see. Let's drop the bishop back. And you can very clearly see how we could create a very strong kingside attack if black is not careful here. With the bishop pair pointing at the black king side, we have pawn e6, preparing something like bishop d6 and castles. We could throw the knight onto the e5 square, but I don't think it actually does anything just yet. Bishop to f4, I think, looks very good. And I'm going to play it because I want to stop bishop to d6. Not that bishop d6 poses like any kind of game over move, but the bishop obviously wants to be on d6. So if I can force it to e7 instead, that's good for me. I think that's relatively obvious. a4 is interesting, but feels unnecessary. I think just bringing the knight into the game is probably the best idea. Let's go knight bd2, looking for knight to e4 potentially. The question would be whether I would want to trade that many pieces. Okay, knight d5. So when I see knight d5, I immediately see that h7 loses a defender, but black isn't castled yet. Does bishop e5 make sense? Offering to give up the bishop pair to get the knight in. It does, but it's also not going anywhere. So let's just drop back. I'm expecting knight 7 to f6 to prepare bishop to d6. But I'm going to play knight to e5. And to be honest, the pressure is looking like it's going to be increasing very quickly if black is not careful. This feels really tricky for black. And that might surprise some of you watching. Like, you know, this position looks perfectly reasonable for the black pieces. Like, how is this like potentially really vulnerable? Well, I guess I just have such good control of the central squares that I just love this position. I think knight e4 makes a lot of sense. Trying to cover d6, maybe even go knight d6. Also, to add more support to getting a knight to g5 in some lines. I could go knight e5, but I don't think I want to trade. Guess maybe something like here and here. Not sure where I want my a-rook. I could play a4, but I feel like black wants to play on the queen side, so I'm not sure why I would allow it. The pawn probably wants to come to a3, if anywhere, to stop b4. Okay, knight e4. Let's say knight f6. Knight g5. Could be sacrifices on e6. Bishop to e5 ideas. Let's do it. Let's go knight e4. Just centralizing the knight. And taking more control of the d6 square, which is useful. If knight 7 to f6, maybe knight f to g5 makes sense, because if takes, I can take back with the knight and stop bishop to d6, which is something I don't want to allow, because if that can be executed, I don't know, maybe it's not a big deal, because maybe the bishop should be monitoring g5. I don't know. I just feel like I don't want to trade off this bishop. At least not for the time being. It feels pretty powerful on this long diagonal. Particularly because it stops knight to f4. Like, I really don't want to allow a move like knight f4. Okay. Okay. We also should be aware there could be sacrifices on h7 at some point as well. but it doesn't work because if we do, there's no kind of Greek gift because that can just be taken. So there's nothing there for the time being. Nothing there for the time being. Okay, knight to f6 is what I'm expecting. How do we want to respond? If I take, what happens? Well, if knight takes... Knight 7 to f6, knight f6, knight f6, knight e5. Let's say knight d5. Queen h5, g6. Can I sack both minor pieces? I actually might be able to, because of bishop e5 and rook e6 possibilities. That's quite interesting. I could sack both minor pieces and play a move like rook e4, or even rook e6 actually, and just checkmate the black king. That looks really interesting. I'm not sure if that will come to fruition, because it is a very specific line, and also it would be banking on my opponent putting his only remaining knight on the d5 square, which I'm not sure is that smart. But it's worth bearing in mind there could be a lot of sacrifices if we see this kind of structure. Whoa, that's a big commitment. Hold on, what? Doesn't he need his pieces on the king side? Okay, what happens after knight e5? What happens? If this, I just snap and then I win material because of this. I don't really see a reason not to play it. Let's go knight e5. Also be aware, we could even throw the f-pawn down the board if we really want. We also have possibilities of bringing the knight to g4 with some action on h6 or f6, although I think we're just asking to be forked. Got to be careful of that. But this looks like a brilliant position. Like, we are ready to start an attack. Like, queen h5 is on the cards, 100%. Queen h5 is on the cards. If we can have a position where probably need this bishop open to make it work properly. So this knight would have to move somewhere. Yeah, I would have to move somewhere. But even if we, like, I don't know, something like this. Interesting. This bishop is crucial to the black defense right now. If that bishop, like, goes to d6, for example, and obviously after takes and takes, we have tactics on the queen with, like, knight f7 or knight g6. I know that. But even if that didn't come with tactics, I still think it'd be very, very hard to play the position, getting rid of that bishop. This is the only reason black is still alive right now. If we trade these bishops off, I think we are significantly better. I would say so. I would say so. Okay. I guess maybe queen g4 could be considered. I'm not sure it comes with any threat, though. Maybe knight f7 could be an idea. Like, takes and takes. Because there's a lot of pieces we're hitting there. I mean, I'm not sure it actually comes to anything, but it's worth considering. I just don't see what knight b6 does. Well, knight 7 to b6. I don't see what it does other than give up the e5 square for now. Because if the plan is to put this knight on f6 and this knight on d5, then you could have just done that immediately with knight 7 f6, which is what I was expecting. This is interesting. This is why I like the Alapin Sicilian as well, because I feel like a lot of the positions are quite easy to play from the white perspective. And this is also why I didn't try to hang on to my extra pawn earlier on in the opening, because, you know, even if I found a way to hang on to it, that's assuming my opponent doesn't know the position better than I do, and they probably do know the position better than I do, if they're playing that kind of gambit line. But also, I know these positions well. I like these positions. So, okay, I'm not really feeling particularly threatened. If something like b4 happens, I mean, maybe that's the idea. c4 is protected for the time being. So you could go b4. it just feels like it just feels irrelevant. Like, okay, let's say queen f3 even, or queen d2, just defending c3. It's like, okay, you can take if you want, but then what? c4 is incredibly weak. How is that helping the black position, right? What I probably want to be aware of is maybe not playing a move like a3, so that a5, b4 opens things up. Wow, my opponent strikes. That is a very good point. That's a very good point from my opponent. I've got to be very careful that I don't lose a piece here. Huh. But it is weakening, though. It is weakening. Okay. Although knight c5, I feel like solves my problems, actually. Because the bishop is under attack. So if knight c5, bishop c5, dc5, that gets rid of the dark squared bishop, which is the best attacking piece. And it comes with tempo on the knight, so there's no time for f4 trapping my bishop. So I think knight c5 makes sense. I'm also threatening e6. If f4 happens, this also opens up. And e6 is incredibly weak. Yeah, it takes and takes, but now my opponent loses their best attacking piece. I've got to say, I'm very happy. Here. Yeah, makes sense. Okay. So if takes and takes... I mean, worst case, I'm just winning a pawn, because you can't take this. Ah, no, you can actually. I don't have this because of this. Good point. Good point. Now, I could consider trying to save the bishop. But if bishop h4, I just get taken, obviously. Even have ideas of this. Seems a bit overkill, though. This is the move I want to play, but there is knight back. With tempo on my queen and defending mate. If a move like g6, I immediately sacrifice. I don't even think about it. Or with the bishop, maybe. That's an instant sack. But knight f6 is the issue. And I don't see my follow-up. So my queen is hit. My bishop is hit. I mean, the knight is still hanging, to be fair. I could play a move like queen h3. That's actually reasonable. Wait. Take. If queen h5 then he can take on f2 with check. So okay, here, knight back, queen h3, hitting e6, keeping an eye on the pawn. If takes... yeah, I can't really take because he takes... Oh no, but then the rook doesn't see, but after king takes, there could be problems anyway because of discovered checks. And queen b6 coming with check. Yeah, that's probably not good. So I probably have to take this. But at the end of the day, like, these positions are fine. Because e6 is so weak. Material should be equal, and e6 is just a massive target. I mean, I still have this incredible knight. Okay, so I assume I have to take this pawn back, because f2 is under attack. So there's no time for a move like queen h5, so let's take. Now we're up a pawn. Queen b6 looks forced. And I don't have this because of this. So maybe just something like knight f3. I don't really want to retreat, though. Queen d4 is interesting, offering a queen trade. I do get an isolated d-pawn, though, which I don't really want. How else can I defend? Rook e2 is a move, but I want my rook pressuring the pawn, not playing defense. Yeah, even if these ideas work with like sacrificing the f-pawn for an attack, there's always knight to f6. So, doesn't really... Maybe queen e2 is the best way to defend. So my queen can see e6, because it is defended once. Does that make sense? I want queen h5, though. Maybe rook f1. Not that I like that, but... Yeah, but if queen h5 is always knight f6 anyway. So, okay, let's go queen e2. I want to attack, but, like, there's always just knight f6. Attacking and defending. So, yeah. Material is equal. Material is equal. I'm also down on time, but I'm threatening knight d7, which is a big threat. A big threat. And the e6 pawn is incredibly weak. My bishop is pretty good. c4 is also has a lot of pressure on it, so b4 ideas shouldn't be working anytime soon. Yeah, I think I can probably just focus on the e6 pawn, trying to get rid of it. Like, dropping my knight back to f3, putting it on a square like d4 maybe, or g5, hitting h7 at the same time. This looks good. I think my opponent did a good job of finding this f4 idea, the f5 idea. I think that was probably the best way to fight back. I'm not sure if we found the absolute best response, but it feels like we've handled this pretty well. I don't know. It'll be interesting to check with the engine what it thinks of that position, because that was complicated. I basically just saw this line as like a bailout, where I mean, I'm still better. I might have had a way to completely win, but I couldn't see it, particularly with my time. So, queen a7. Queen a7? Okay, if knight d7, rook e8. Hold on, what? E8. I guess. Can I sack? Can I sack? Takes. Check. Here. Doesn't quite work, does it? It's close to working. Here. Take. Check here. Doesn't quite work. So close. Here, there's this. I mean, I could just play a move like knight back. Although, I guess there's rook f6. So if knight d7, that forces rook e8. Okay, let's throw this on. There's no rook f6, obviously. This pawn on g3 is very useful, stopping knight to f4, by the way. Very useful. And the pawns complement the bishop very nicely. Oh, I didn't consider that. So if takes, he takes. I didn't consider that, okay. But can I sack now? Or go in like this? I can take my knight, though. Take. Check here. I'm not seeing a follow-up. Very low on time. I think I just have to come back and admit I was wrong. Maybe I want to get a rook to d4 to shut off the diagonal and also threaten rook h4 stuff. That's probably the way to go, isn't it? That's probably the way to go. Let's do it. Rook f8. That's annoying. Maybe knight back to f3 in that position. I have to be better, but I'm just need to not blunder anything, which is looking very likely at the moment. Yeah, still no sacrifices work. Yeah, I've just encouraged this, which is really silly. That doesn't work. Maybe this is the easiest move. I don't want to play it, but I'd rather keep my knight on e5 than drop it back and open it up to bishop takes ideas. If I just get rook d4 in, then I'm in a much better situation. Yeah, because rook h4 is going to be a major threat. I think, anyway. Also, now knight to f6, sorry, knight d7 stuff is actually a threat because you can't take, because I have enough defenders. So he has to deal with knight d7 first, and he can't go rook f7 to defend. He can't go bishop c6. If he goes bishop c8, that's incredibly passive. I mean, it does stop this, and it defends e6, but it's very passive. Rook h6, what? Okay, there's no threat. Sorry, don't I just have knight g4? What am I missing? Nothing. There's just knight g4. And then the rook can't come to either of these squares because both of them are covered. To be fair, I think he was... Maybe he was losing a rook no matter what. Or an exchange even. I mean, unless he puts the rook here? Queen takes with check. King moves. The knight is defended. Just. Although, knight e5 looks pretty good. Threatening this. Yeah, rook h6 isn't an attacking move, is it? It's kind of a survival move. But I'm very low on time, so I'm going to have to shut up a little bit and focus. I don't want to throw this. Don't want to throw this. e6 is weak. e6 is so weak. f7, sorry, f2 is defended. King h8. Knight e5 also threatens the knight. Yeah, let's do it. Knight f7 wins an exchange. Could go bishop c8, but then I take the knight. Bishop c6, I take the bishop. There's no good way to defend. There's no good way to defend. h7 is still weak. I'm up a pawn. But his knight is a problem. His rooks are problematic. His king is so weak. Rook d4 is still a viable move. Cutting the queen off and lifting the rook over somewhere. Rook d4 probably still wants to be played. There's still no knight f4. How do you defend this? Bishop c8. Queen d5. There's no rook f5. Rook e8. Ooh, I just give the check then. And that's game over. Yeah, that's game over. It should just be winning. This should just be winning. The light squared bishop for black just doesn't do anything. It's not taking part in the game. That I didn't consider. This still probably makes the most sense. I have a threat of this if the queen stops covering and I pick up the rook. f4 always defends the knight, although there is this pin for now. Rook here, knight here. Queen here. d4. Yeah. I think this works. Take. I have to watch for queen a7 check ideas, but I always have queen d4, or I can just take with the queen. So I have a pawn and a bishop and a knight for a rook, which is obviously very good. I have some fancy moves like bishop g6, actually. Quite funny. They don't quite work because he can take the knight, but they're cool because if you take, you get forked really badly. So I probably want to move my queen somewhere. Although maybe I should just be playing like... I don't know, I've got to be careful. But I think we just have a very strong attack here. We have a strong initiative. My king is pretty safe. There's no way for him to get his queen over to the king side easily. If queen f6... Queen f6 is interesting, preparing this. Whoa, g5. I assumed queen d4 was very strong, because I did consider that move, g5, but this looked deadly. Queen f6. Yeah, I think knight f3 is the easiest move. Forcing a queen trade. Yeah, I mean, that has to be good. That has to be good. The endgame is just much better. Okay. Take. There's no queen takes because of the pin. And after knight takes, the pawn is defended by the rook. I have a passed f-pawn, which can be escorted rather easily. Also, the queenside pawns are on light squares, which my light squared bishop could go after. I might have had a better attacking idea, but I'm low on time, so this is the easiest way, in my opinion, to win this. Just to trade down. I don't know what that does. So I'm just going to play f5. I mean, he's not going to take, is he? Okay. Let's look for this. If I trade, then the game is over. Yeah, that's game over. That's game over. Completely game over, because I have this pass pawn that black has to keep stopping, and I'm going to throw this down the board. I'm actually going to give this check, because I want to get my knight to control the f6 square. I think I want it on e4. Okay. If he's going to bring his king away, then that's fine by me. Let's push. h6 might be forced. Okay, he's threatening this. Let's come up the board. Could go here, trying to infiltrate, but b1 is protected. Let's actually bring the knight to d4, just to cover the bishop. Try and be safe. Bring the pawns up in a safe manner. Yeah, now I just have a3, and he can go here. But his rook's out of the game now. His rook's just not doing anything. My knight's defending the bishop's covering b3. He could come here and try and win the a3 pawn. I just don't think it matters. Okay, let's go f6. I might just be giving up all my pawns here, but feels like it's not relevant. I think I have a forced win. I think this is a forced win. Because after pawn takes, bishop takes, I'm going to play f7, followed by knight to e6, and promote. I don't think my opponent can stop the promotion. And the rook and 3 pawns look dangerous, but I think I'm just checkmating him at that point. So it's kind of irrelevant. So I'm giving up all 3 of my queenside pawns. But it doesn't really matter. It doesn't really matter. Okay, rook back to a1. So he's trying to come here, but I think it's too slow. Oh, wait, no, that's actually quite smart. That's quite smart, actually. Oh, wow, okay. Check here, promote. He's going to go rook f1 and win. Okay, so I guess king e5. You obviously can't take my bishop because I promote. So if rook f1, rook e1, okay. It's interesting. My opponent is fighting quite hard here. If I give this check, he can't take because I promote. And the rook is cut off. He can play this. Check. Interesting. Could actually be a draw. This is probably the easiest. So I'm basically just preparing to win a rook. Because knight e6 can't really be stopped. If rook f6, I have king e7. That's even worse. And it's a good job I have this c-pawn, because otherwise I'd have to try to figure out how to do the knight and bishop mate, and I'm not sure I can remember. Could grab this, but let's give this check. So if I promote, rook takes, knight takes, takes. Oh, wait, no, he draws. He draws that. Oh, wow. Hold on, have I messed up? Hold on. I need this. This is really messy. This is really messy. I had no reason to make it this messy. I might actually have to perform a knight and bishop checkmate, and I'm not sure I remember how. Oh, God. Well, I know the general principles of creating the pyramid and whatnot. Yeah, so the idea is if king takes, then I go knight to f4. and then I win because I promote. So I think he has to sack. And after takes and takes, go b4. Wait, what? No, now I just win. Now you can't stop the promotion. He might not have considered knight to f4, but that was the whole point of king e5. This has been a crazy game. My opponent has fought back so well, although there is king back to g7, which I didn't consider. Oh my god. King back, check, king back. What's the plan? What's the plan? I think my opponent has drawn this. I don't have anything better, do I? No, this is just a draw. Oh my god. How on earth has he drawn this? Oh my god. Well, the thing is, I got so low on time. I think that's what I did wrong. I got so low on time, but this is just a draw, right? Yeah, this is a draw. There is no way. This is going to be an interesting analysis. I mean, I should have won that outright. My time management was horrific. Really bad time management. God, let's have a look at it, though. Really interesting nonetheless. Okay, so 84% accuracy for me, 83.7 for my opponent. I have no idea how he hung on to that. The opening was great. Knight f6 I've never seen before. And according to the engine, bishop e5 is actually strong. And after knight bd7, c4 is a move, which is what I was calculating. But after a6 takes and queen takes, knight c3, e6. Here I didn't know what I should be doing. And apparently I have to find queen e2, which I'm not going to lie, I don't know if I would have considered. I was thinking more like d4 type things, which is just worse for me after takes. So I decided knight to f3 would be the best way to go about it, which in retrospect I think was a good decision. So takes, castles, a6, bishop c4, knight back to f6, which surprised me. I thought e6. Well, initially I thought knight b6. I was trying to think of sacrifices, but they didn't quite work. And after bishop b3, c4, bishop c2, I quite liked the look of this position. After something like knight to f6, the engine likes b3, but even just something like h3 is strong. Or maybe not d4 straight away, although d4 is playable. Like takes, going for this position. We should always be a bit better with our queenside majority. So knight 5 to f6, d4, b5. Engine wants the bishop on e2. That's quite interesting. Why? e6, a4, b4. It wants to play on the queen side. Oh, okay. That surprises me. a5, bishop b7, cb4, cb4. Okay. This is strange because we're giving ourselves an isolated pawn for no reason, but okay, I quite like the way that we played with rook e1, c4, bishop c2, e6, and then bishop f4 is a key move, stopping bishop d6. I thought my opponent might go for knight b6, looking for this, but also looking for this. I figured we probably have knight e5, and if like knight bd5, bishop back to g3, bishop to d6, and then like still an interesting enough position, like knight d2, castles, knight to f3 maybe. Okay, knight f3 isn't amazing, but we have good central control. So you have bishop e7, knight bd2, knight d5, bishop back. Castles, knight e4 is strong, taking away any bishop d6 ideas. And this really, really surprised me. And it's not a very good move. I thought the knight should come this way. And here, after something like takes and takes, black is perfectly fine. Like queen e2, if bishop d6, take. I mean, white is probably slightly better because we have the majority on the queen side. Which, by the way, if you're wondering why I'm talking about that, it basically just means that we have an easier time creating a passed pawn later in the game because we have the majority on the side away from the kings. The kings are on the king side. So although black has a 4 versus 3 on the king side, my king is right there. So yeah, knight 7b6 was confusing. Knight e5 is inaccurate. Knight c5 is better. Huh. And then if takes and takes, we have a similar thing to the game, except without this. Like, let's say knight... Sorry. Let's say knight back to d7. Here, queen d4 is good. Oh, bishop d6 as well. Oh, yeah, that looks gorgeous. Knight e5, rook e5. Yeah, this is very nice. Okay, so knight e5 is inaccurate because of that. Here, f5 is a mistake. Knight c5 is the only response. And this is just completely lost. f4. Okay, queen h5 was the best move? What? Knight f6? Queen h3? I calculated this. I thought takes... Oh my god, I have mate. What? Oh, I have mate. I didn't see this. I did not consider that. So my instincts were correct, but I just didn't realize why. Also, I have bishop h4, which I did actually consider briefly. And I'm... What's the material count here? Material is equal, but this pawn sucks. So cb6 is a miss. fg3, hg3, queen b6, and I'm still better. Queen e2 is fine. Yeah, queen e2 is fine. Queen a7 is a mistake. I've got to say that did surprise me. Knight d7 is good. Rook f7, knight back. Rook a d1. This is just a good position. Okay, knight g4 I should have played immediately, which in retrospect looks very obvious. I forced the rook back. Here, queen e4 is the best move, threatening mate. And if knight f6, oh, of course, I take. Oh, well, that makes sense now. Here. Mate is stopped, but queen e6. Now the f-file is shut, and this is easy. Yeah, this is so easy. So, okay, here knight g4 is still strong. Takes king h8. Knight e5 is the best move. Rook d5 is the best move. f4 is strong. All of this is correct. Queen d4 is correct. Here I do have g4, which I considered, but I thought was complicated because I had no time, so I went for this instead. And here I cannot believe I threw this endgame. I mean, how do you even throw this? This is all best. King g3, rook h1, knight d4. This is all good. a3. Just pushing is correct. Here, this is too slow. f6 is better. Okay. Let's say rook a2. I sack, go f7. The king comes over. Oh my god, that's so obvious. That's just game. That's just game. So this is unnecessary. f6 though. g6. Yeah, g6 is unnecessary, isn't it? I can just sack the bishop. f7, king g7, g6. Same idea. g6 is just slow. I'm still winning though, but f7 is a mistake. I need to go bring the king closer. And after the check, king e5. No. Yeah. And if check, king d6, rook f1, then f7, king g7, bishop h5. Very similar to the game, but what's the difference? Let's say a5. If king e7, oh, I have this. Do I? No, I don't. Okay, no, I have bishop e2. I'm not even going to claim I considered this configuration. So f7 is just bad. King e5 is good. Rook e1 is a mistake. King d6 is the only move. Bishop h5 is... We're still winning. How are we still winning? But I need to go king e7. Okay, I mean, obviously if rook e1... Okay, oh no, I still have to see this. Because knight e6 doesn't work. King f8, and this is a draw. No, I mean, to be fair, my opponent has to find only moves. Although that isn't that hard to find. I still think we have a chance to win this position, to be honest. Because if b4, then I just win. I still think that's difficult, but knight e6 is just a draw. King e5, b4, knight f4. Apparently you can actually take, but again, this, although it's a draw, is... Actually, no, this is quite easy. Take, take, I run the king, he pushes the pawn, I run the king, and here he just shuffles, and my king has to stay guarding, and then that's it. If I've run over here, I'm going to be too slow, because c2, so... And if I go here first, obviously you can't take this, and then I start to run, then c2 sacrificing the pawn, you take here, and then obviously this is just a draw. King g7, knight e6, king h6. I have nothing. I have nothing. I mean, the engine suggests knight d4, trying to sack this for knight f5. Whoa. I didn't even consider that. So you'd have to find king back. To be fair, I feel like my opponent would have found that. And if take, take, knight e6, king here, knight f4, king here, knight e6, king here, knight d4, king here, and yeah, I have to just keep giving checks, so there's just nothing. I can't believe that. My opponent defended so well. Yeah, I had to see this configuration on e2 to support the king coming to e7, and I did not consider that at all. That's a really interesting game, though. I hope you guys found this very educational. I certainly learned a lot here. Yeah, missed that checkmating opportunity with queen h5, queen h3, bishop h7. Bit frustrated about that, but yeah, luckily, this climb is not necessarily about rating. It's more so about education, and hopefully that was very educational. So thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.